Chahoua come in an incredible variety of colors and patterns, and it can be tempting to call these morphs like we do with other species of reptiles. But a morph is something that is heritable. You take two parents and breed them to reliably produce a look that is consistent in the offspring. We're seeing hints of this with super white Chahoua, but we simply don't have the data yet, which can take years to accomplish. So in this video, we're looking at different traits and phenotypes, what these geckos actually look like without overselling the genetics just yet. I'm Bryan with Sundown Reptiles. Let's take a look at some traits that are showing up in Chahoua consistently throughout the hobby today. And if you're breeding Chahoua, let me know what traits you are seeing showing up in your offspring in the comments below. A trait is a single heritable characteristic, usually base color, pattern structure, white expression. It's generally just one piece of the puzzle. A phenotype is essentially the combination of traits that an animal has to give it the look that we see visibly with our eyes. Chahoua go through this transformation called ontogenesis, where they change color from babies into adulthood. Now these geckos start out as very small, tan or brown geckos, and as they age, develop into beautifully colored animals as adults. As with most New Caledonian geckos, Chahoua are able to fire up and fire down depending on their mood or the conditions that they're exposed to. This can lead to drastic color changes in the animal and is something that should be kept in mind when purchasing your gecko. This also goes for white collars, as they can both fire up and fire down on that animal. So what a collar looks like on a fired animal is going to be drastically different from if it is fired down. While Chahoua change color from babies into their adulthood, it is also important to remember that it is not uncommon for Chahoua to change color throughout their entire life. Often, once they get into their older years, a lot of them can lose their coloration and end up going green. Starting with some of the colors. First off, reds. Everybody loves a red gecko. Unfortunately, Chahoua can get very, very red in their coloration. Green is another amazing color, and what has given these animals their namesake, the mossy prehensile-tailed gecko. You can get everything from super dark forest greens to really nice olive colorations. And in addition to some of this, we're also seeing some geckos that can have some yellows on them as well. Pink is another coloration that is very common within the Chahoua world. You can have animals that are bubblegum pink to almost a nice magenta coloration. And these are always showstoppers. Everybody loves to see a pink gecko. Now, high color is a term that gets thrown around quite a bit, and for good reason. Generally, high color animals are usually very saturated in their coloration and can really pop. Some Chahoua simply can have more earthy tones to them. So when we see things that are really bright orange, bright pink, bright red, that can also be used as a descriptor for those animals. And we can also have high coloration animals be stacked with some of the other traits that we're going to be talking about as we continue on. For our colorations, reds and nice high oranges fall into that high color category and just produce stunning animals, especially when you splash some white pattern or a white collar on that animal. These geckos are some of the prettiest in existence, in my opinion. A pastel Chahoua is generally a specimen that has very soft pinks, peaches, or soft oranges on it. These colorations can make for a beautiful gecko and are very desirable as well. Generally, with my pastel pairings, the offspring usually will have a very light base coloration straight out of the egg. So it's almost like a creamy tan that comes straight out of the egg. This doesn't always happen with all pairings, but is definitely a trend that I have noticed with my offspring. In contrast to all these different colorations that we were talking about, you can also get animals that have more naturalistic colors, more earthy tones like your browns and grays as well. All Chahoua are beautiful and everybody has their taste. Dark Chahoua are popping up in collections all across the world. Now, the question is, what do we call these? Melanism is usually referred to animals that are almost completely black, while hypermelanism are animals that are extremely dark in coloration, have that increased melanin, but patterns can still be seen on that gecko. These terms have been used pretty loosely and sometimes interchangeably, and not always in the correct form. Let's take a look at some of the different animals in some collections that show potential for being melanistic or hypermelanistic. White is a coloration that we see more and more on Chahoua geckos today. This originally started with animals that had very little to sometimes even no white markings at all, to having geckos that have white collars going across the neck. Now, we have seen animals that were from the wild that do have these white collars as well, and this is definitely something that we can breed for. Not all white collars are created equal. Some can be super bright paper white, while others can be more greenish. Now, this can change as the animal fires up or fires down, but it has definitely been proven that some lines tend to produce more bright white coloration than others. Now, aside from a white collar, you can start to get animals that will have white going down the body. Generally, an animal that not only has a white collar, but has white patterning going down the body can then start to fall into the category of what is considered a high white. This is a subjective term, but is usually something that is used for animals that has that white collar and more body white. White spotting is another trait that we see where we have white spots going down the laterals of that gecko as well. And that is a very interesting look that seems to be across many different bloodlines. White flecking is something that you can also see on the body of the animal. This is something that can be very minute, but if you pay attention to a lot of geckos, you can see that there's small little flecks of white that can be splattered across the body of that animal. White shoulders or wings are another look that a Chahoua can have where it has some white on its neck but doesn't quite have a full collar. Now, super white is a term that we created in order to give a descriptor for these geckos that have an incredible amount of white. More specifically, 50% or more of their body covered in white. Now, these geckos can be very spectacular to look at because not only do they have all of this white from their neck going all the way down their body, now we can start stacking in some of these other traits that we were talking about. So we can have a pastel super white, you can have a high color super white, a red super white, but a lot of these base colors that we're now starting to play with these white patterns are creating some spectacular results, and super white geckos are just phenomenal. We're also getting some interesting patterns on these animals. So the banded super white is a project that I've been working on in which we have not only the white collar, but thick white bands that are very distinct going across the body of this animal, mixed with some sort of coloration in between those bands. This has been a very unique project and have been some of the most spectacular looking Chahoua, in my opinion, that exist in the world today. Now, when you look down the back of a Chahoua, they can have these small dark circles going down their dorsal. I refer to those as ocelli, and they can vary depending on the animal and the lineage genetics of the geckos that are out there. We're also seeing black markings in addition to the ocelli that can be on the laterals of these geckos as well. This is not as common, but is definitely something that I'm seeing not only in my collection, but in others around the world. Striping is something that is relatively new in the Chahoua world, and we're starting to see a lot more of it. Now, we can have an animal that simply has a dark pattern stripe going down its back that could either be light or dark, but it is noticeable. Generally, we're seeing this striping starting from just behind the head, going down to the base of the tail. Another trait that we're seeing that goes along with striping is pinstriping. Now, we've heard this term in the crested gecko world, and when I look at a Chahoua that has defined dark lines running down the dorsal that are paralleling each other, I can't stop myself from saying that that is a pinstripe animal. Now, we've seen very few full pinstriped animals thus far, although they do exist and we're starting to see it more and more. Some of the animals are exhibiting just partial pinstriping going down the back, and I have a hunch that this correlates with animals that have this ocelli. Usually when this pinstriping is occurring, it's because those ocelli are starting to break up and extend, either going up towards the head or down towards the tail of that animal. In conclusion, we've covered a lot of the different traits, phenotypes, and some potential morphs that we are seeing in the hobby today. And there is no doubt that as time goes on, we're going to figure out more about the genetics of this amazing species. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Please like and subscribe if you've not already done so. And if you're looking for your own Pine Island Chahoua to add to your collection, please visit sundownreptiles.com. Thank you all so much and have a great day.